My name is Claire. I am 32 years old, and I never imagined that my marriage, something I once thought was my safe haven, would become the very stage where betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak would play out before my eyes. When I first met Scott through a friend's introduction, he was warm, sociable, and seemed like the kind of man who could light up a room just by entering it. I was captivated by the ease with which he spoke, his confidence, and his ability to make everyone feel seen. I had spent so many years working hard, often feeling invisible, and when Scott looked at me, I felt for once like I mattered. That was enough for me to take the leap. We dated quickly, married within a year, and built what I thought was a future together. Scott had been living with his mother before our marriage, but with the money I inherited from my late father, we were able to build a house on his family's land. He told me it was the perfect solution. His mother would still be nearby. He would have peace of mind, knowing she wasn't alone, and we would get to enjoy our own newlywed space. I agreed naively, thinking it was the best of both worlds. I remember standing in front of that new house for the first time, my heart swelling with hope. The walls were bare, the floors untouched, and the rooms echoed with emptiness. But to me, they sang with promise. I had invested nearly all my savings into furnishing it, wanting us to start our life together with comfort and beauty. Scott told me it was our home, but the deed bore only his name. He brushed off my concerns when I asked, saying it was just a formality. I wanted to believe him, so I did. The early days of marriage were blissful. We were busy with our jobs, but somehow we made time for small joys. Dinners together, lazy weekends, and late-night conversations about our dreams. His mother, for the most part, kept her distance. She worked part-time, and though she occasionally came by, her visits were manageable. I thought, perhaps foolishly, that we had struck a healthy balance, but cracks began to show, subtle at first, then widening until they became unmissable. It started when Scott suggested I be the one to transfer money to his mother each month, $2, $300, to cover her expenses and support. He insisted he would take care of the household bills while I made the payments to her. I agreed, thinking it was fair. After all, she was his mother, and families are meant to support one another. But $2, $300 was no small amount. It consumed a huge portion of my salary, forcing me to work longer hours and sacrifice my own comforts. I told myself it was temporary, that it was an act of kindness, that it would keep the peace. For a while it did. But then his mother quit her job and began visiting our home almost daily. Suddenly her presence was everywhere, her criticism sharp, her disapproval constant. She would run her finger across the furniture and scowl at the dust, shake her head at my cooking when I came home late and could only prepare simple meals, and sneer at the fact that after years of marriage, I had not yet given her a grandchild. "You're already past 30, she said one evening, her lips curled in disdain. "What kind of woman can't even bear children? A wife who doesn't cook, doesn't clean, and doesn't give heirs? Is she even worthy of being a wife?" I bit my tongue until it nearly bled. Scott sat silently, sometimes nodding at her words, sometimes defending her in small, half-hearted ways. But never me. He never once looked at his mother and told her she was wrong. He never once reached for my hand to reassure me that I was enough. Instead, he told me not to take her words so seriously. The silence between us grew heavier with each passing month. Then came the real blow. Scott lost his job. He never told me, at least not until I confronted him after noticing that his salary hadn't been deposited into our account for months. "I quit," he said flatly, his eyes darting away from mine. The boss was unreasonable, always nagging me for minor mistakes. I couldn't stand it anymore. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. "What are we going to do now?" But Scott shrugged as though it wasn't urgent. "You work too. You can support us for a while, can't you? I'll look for something better, something worthy of my skills, something better." He said it so casually, as if he had the luxury of time, as if our savings weren't already draining away. So I worked longer hours. I picked up extra shifts. I came home exhausted, my body aching, my mind heavy with worry. And every night, my mother-in-law was there to remind me of my failings. "You're never home. The house is a mess. You're neglecting your duties as a wife. If you can't take care of Scott, You're worthless." Scott never defended me. He sat on the sofa, eyes glued to the television, while I stood in the kitchen, tears stinging my eyes as I washed dishes in silence. But the betrayal that would break me didn't come from his mother's cruelty. It came from Scott himself. After nearly a year of him being unemployed, he finally found work through a company run by one of his mother's friends. It was a chance for him to start fresh, to prove himself, to help carry the weight I had been bearing alone. For a brief moment, I felt hope again. I even prayed for him to succeed. But that hope was short-lived. He came home later and later. His phone buzzed with messages he quickly silenced. He withdrew money from our joint account without telling me, money I had worked hard to earn. He grew colder, distant, a stranger in his own home. One night while he slept, I unlocked his phone with his fingerprint and found the truth. I had feared messages with a woman named Kristen. They weren't vague or innocent. They were declarations of love, promises of marriage, fantasies of a new life together without me. Can't wait to leave her. Our date was amazing today. Wish we could be together forever. Soon, Kristen. Soon. I felt the ground collapse beneath me. My body trembled as I scrolled through every word, each one a dagger piercing my chest. My husband, the man I sacrificed for the man I defended against, whispers the man I thought was my partner was planning a future with another woman while I was killing myself to hold our life together. The next morning I confronted him. He denied it at first, of course, but when I showed him the screenshots, his face fell. He stammered excuses, blaming stress, blaming me, blaming his mother's nagging. And then, as if it explained everything, he said, the words that sealed our fate. Kristen is the one for me. You don't understand me anymore. Something inside me broke. I looked at him, this man I had loved, this man I had fought for, and I saw a stranger. That same day, his mother, standing with him in the living room, sneered at me again. A young, beautiful woman like Kristen is more suited for our family than you ever were. Leave. This is Scott's house, not yours. I looked around the room I had furnished with my own savings, the house I had made a home, the walls that had witnessed both love and cruelty. And I realized they were right about one thing: I didn't belong there anymore. But what they didn't realize was that I wasn't going to leave in silence. Not this time. I calmly pulled out the divorce papers I had already prepared, because somewhere deep inside I had known this day would come. Then sign this, I said, my voice steady. Scott's eyes widened in shock. My mother-in-law gasped, but I felt only a strange calm wash over me. This wasn't the end of me. This was the beginning. Scott didn't sign those papers that night. He stared at them with wide, frantic eyes, his hands trembling as if they might burn him if he touched them. His mother, standing just behind him, snatched the documents away and ripped them in half with a hiss, her face contorted with fury. "You ungrateful woman," she spat. "How dare you try to throw away my son like trash after all he has done for you? This house is his, this land is ours, and you will leave with nothing. Do you understand? Nothing." Her words were venom, but I stood still, my chest rising and falling in quiet rhythm. Inside me, a fire was beginning to take shape. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something quieter, heavier: resolve. I packed my bags the next day. Scott didn't try to stop me. He sat slumped on the sofa, silent, as his mother looked on with satisfaction. "Finally," she said as I wheeled my suitcase through the doorway. "Now, Kristen can take her rightful place." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because as I walked out of that house, I wasn't leaving in defeat. I was leaving with the truth. And the truth would one day bring them down. I moved into a small apartment downtown, one I could barely afford on my salary alone. The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake in that cramped, unfamiliar space, hearing echoes of Scott's voice, the sneers of his mother, the cruel silence of a marriage that had rotted away. But even in those lonely nights, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, the poison was outside of me, not inside. Still, the wounds lingered. At work, I threw myself into projects, staying late, exhausting myself to escape the thoughts that haunted me. But no matter how much I tried to push forward, reminders found me. A coworker mentioned seeing Scott around town with Kristen. My landlord mentioned that someone had come by asking for my address, a woman older with sharp eyes. I knew it was her, my mother-in-law, circling like a vulture. And then, as if to twist the knife deeper, I received a letter. A formal notice stamped and sealed, informing me that Scott and his mother were filing for full ownership of the house I had built with my inheritance. They claimed I had abandoned the marriage, forfeiting my rights to everything. For a long moment I sat frozen with the paper in my hands. Then the fury came, not hot and loud, but cold and steady. They weren't just trying to erase me from their lives. They were trying to erase my sacrifices, my money, my dignity, my very existence. I called a lawyer the next morning. Her name was Rachel, and she had a reputation for being relentless. When I laid everything out before her, the receipts for the furnishings, the bank statements showing the money I had funneled into that house, the evidence of Scott's affair, she leaned back in her chair and gave me a sharp, approving nod. "You have more power here than you think," she said. "They want to strip you of everything, but they've left a trail of mistakes. If you're ready, we can fight this." Ready. The word echoed inside me. I didn't feel ready. I felt exhausted, battered, bruised in ways no one could see. But beneath that, a voice whispered, "If not now, then when?" So I said yes. The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings, documents, and strategy sessions. Rachel was meticulous, gathering every shred of evidence we could: bank transfers to Scott's secret account, screenshots of his messages with Kristen, proof that my inheritance had gone into building the house, even testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed the screaming matches between me and my mother-in-law. The case was building, but so was my anxiety. Each night, I lay awake imagining what would happen when we faced them in court. I could already see Scott's smug smile, his mother's piercing glare, Kristen's shadow in the background. But something unexpected happened before the court date arrived. One evening, there was a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, I found Scott standing there. He looked thinner, haggard, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness. "Claire," he said, his voice trembling, "please, can we talk?" Every instinct told me to slam the door in his face. But curiosity, perhaps even a lingering shard of the woman who once loved him, made me step aside. He sat at my kitchen table, wringing his hands, staring at the floor. "Things with Kristen. They're not what I thought. She doesn't understand me. She only wanted me for the money she thought I had. And Mom, she's been pushing me so hard, controlling everything. I made a mistake. I want to come back." I stared at him, silent. My heart twisted, not with longing, but with something darker: pity. This was the man I had once built my life around, now reduced to a beggar of comfort, scorned by the very woman he chose over me. "You didn't just make a mistake, Scott," I said quietly. "You betrayed me. You let your mother humiliate me. You let another woman into our marriage, and you tried to steal the home I built. There is no going back." He flinched as if I had struck him, his eyes filling with desperate tears. But I felt nothing. No guilt, no temptation, no softness. Only clarity. When he left that night, I knew he was truly gone from my life. The court case arrived soon after. The room was tense, the air thick with the unspoken history between us. Scott sat beside his mother, both of them stiff with false confidence. Rachel stood by me, her presence steady, her voice clear as she laid out the evidence piece by piece. I watched as their faces shifted, Scott's bravado faltering, his mother's rage barely contained. Kristen was there too, lurking in the back, her lips pressed into a thin line. And then came my turn to speak. I stood, my voice shaking at first, but growing stronger with every word. I told the judge about my inheritance, about the money I had poured into the house, about the nights I worked myself to exhaustion, while Scott sat unemployed, about the endless stream of insults from his mother. I spoke of the betrayal, the affair, the attempt to erase me. And finally, I said the words I had carried in my heart for months. I may have walked away from that house, but I did not abandon my marriage. They abandoned me. They abandoned decency, honesty, and love, and I will not let them rewrite the truth. The courtroom was silent. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in my mother-in-law's eyes. The judge didn't rule that day, but as I left the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. Because no matter what the decision would be, I had spoken my truth. I had refused to be erased. But the story wasn't over. Because betrayal doesn't end neatly with a gavel's strike. It lingers, it festers, it resurfaces in ways you don't expect. And I would soon learn that my fight was far from finished. The days following the first hearing felt strangely suspended, as though time had slowed down just to test my endurance. I went to work. I returned home to my small apartment. I ate my meals alone. But my mind was trapped in that courtroom, replaying every glance, every word, every detail. Scott's hollow eyes when the evidence was shown. My mother-in-law's venom barely restrained beneath her polite mask. Kristen's smug silhouette in the back row. I tried to convince myself that the worst was behind me, that I had spoken my truth and nothing could erase it. But then the whispers started. Colleagues at work pulled me aside hesitantly, their eyes filled with pity. "Claire, someone's been saying things about you." Apparently, Scott's mother had been spreading rumors in the community that I had been a neglectful wife, that I'd wasted Scott's money on luxuries, while he struggled, that I was barren and bitter and had driven him into another woman's arms. The lies spread like wildfire. Invitations to social gatherings stopped arriving. Friends who once checked in on me grew distant. I could feel the judgment in the stares of neighbors when I walked down the street. And the worst part, a small voice inside me whispered that maybe they believed her. Maybe they always would. One night, I sat at my kitchen table, the weight of it all pressing down on me, and wondered if this fight was even worth it. What was I really trying to win? A house that had been poisoned with cruelty. Money that could never buy back the years I had given. Or was it something less tangible? Dignity, vindication, the chance to prove I wasn't the villain in their story. Rachel called me the next morning, her voice brisk but reassuring. "They're trying to break you outside of court because they know they're losing inside of it. Don't let their noise shake you. We'll silence them with evidence." Her certainty steadied me, but I still felt fragile, as though one more blow could shatter me completely. That blow came sooner than I expected. A thick envelope arrived in my mailbox one afternoon. Inside were photographs, me at work, me leaving my apartment, me sitting alone at a cafe. Each photo was accompanied by a note in a familiar sharp handwriting. "You'll never escape us. You'll always be nothing." I knew immediately it was her, my mother-in-law. She had taken her war beyond words and into threats. My hands trembled as I held the papers, a mixture of fear and fury coursing through me. For a moment I wanted to curl up and hide, to let the world close in around me. But then I remembered Rachel's words, and I remembered Tim, the man I once loved, the man whose memory had been dragged through the mud by his own family. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for the truth of what my life had been. At the next hearing, Rachel presented the threats to the court. She laid out the evidence of harassment, the forged will, the financial manipulation. Piece by piece, the story of my marriage was unspooled before the judge. And as painful as it was to hear it spoken aloud, I felt a strange sense of power in it too. My suffering was no longer hidden. It was acknowledged, documented, undeniable. Scott, however, crumbled. When pressed about the affair, he admitted it under oath, his face red with shame. Kristen shifted uncomfortably in the back, her confidence faltering. My mother-in-law, though, held her ground. She accused me of fabricating evidence, of twisting the story to play the victim. Her words were sharp, but they rang hollow in the heavy silence of the courtroom. When it was my turn to speak again, I didn't focus on the money or the house. Instead, I spoke of the nights I had worked until exhaustion to support our family, the insults I endured, the loneliness of being married to a man who treated me like a burden. I told the judge that this case wasn't just about property. It was about the erasure of my existence, the attempt to reduce me to nothing after years of sacrifice. I could feel the weight of the room shift as I spoke. Even the judge's expression softened just slightly. But the most shocking moment came not from me or even from Rachel. It came from someone I never expected. Kristen stood up. Her voice trembled as she addressed the judge. "I didn't want to get dragged into this, but I can't stay quiet anymore. Scott told me he would leave Claire, that the house and money would be ours. His mother promised she would make it happen. But it was all lies. He never intended to divorce her, not really. He wanted both of us, and when I realized that, I ended things." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Scott's face went pale, his mother's fury barely contained. For the first time, their alliance cracked wide open. Kristen's words were like a key turning in a lock. Suddenly, everything made sense: the manipulation, the desperation, the endless cruelty. It wasn't just about me. It was about control, greed, and a family that would stop at nothing to keep their power intact. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Scott looked like a broken man, his mother like a cornered animal. As I left the courthouse that day, the sunlight hit my face, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to hope. I hadn't won yet, the case was still ongoing, but I had survived every attempt to break me. And now their lives were beginning to collapse under the weight of their own making. But hope is fragile, and I knew better than to think the war was over. Because people who thrive on cruelty don't give up easily. They lash out, they dig deeper, they strike harder when they realize they're losing. And in the days to come, I would discover just how dangerous my mother-in-law could be when cornered. The days after Kristen's testimony were eerily quiet, and that silence unsettled me more than their constant attacks ever did. Scott and his mother vanished from sight. No more rumors spread through the community. No more letters or photographs appeared in my mailbox. For the first time in months, I was left alone. But rather than feeling relief, I felt the tension coil tighter in my chest. Rachel noticed it too when I met her for coffee to prepare for the final round of hearings. She stirred her tea with a deliberate calmness, then looked me in the eye. "They're regrouping," she said. "Don't mistake silence for surrender. People like your mother-in-law, they don't walk away quietly. They come back sharper, crueler, and more desperate." Her words rang true sooner than I wanted. One evening after finishing a late shift, I returned to my apartment to find the front door slightly ajar. My heart stopped. I pushed it open cautiously, and the sight inside froze me in place. My drawers were pulled out, papers scattered, framed photographs smashed on the floor. And in the center of the mess, written in bold red paint across my wall, were the words, "You don't belong here." My knees buckled beneath me. I could barely breathe as I reached for my phone and called the police. They came, took photos, filed a report, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. No forced entry, no clear evidence of who had done it. I knew. I knew in my bones it was her, but without proof there was nothing they could do. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch with every light in the apartment turned on, clutching a kitchen knife, jumping at every sound. Fear pressed against me from all sides, but beneath it was something else too: fury. They thought they could scare me back into silence. They thought intimidation could erase the truth. They were wrong. The next morning I walked into Rachel's office, exhaustion etched into every line of my face, and I told her what had happened. She listened without interrupting, then leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "Then we'll bring this into court too. We'll show them for what they are, not just greedy, but dangerous." The final hearing arrived like a storm. The courtroom was packed, reporters and curious onlookers filling the benches. The tension was palpable, every breath heavy with anticipation. Scott sat beside his mother, both of them stiff with defiance. I could see the cracks, though, his restless hands, her narrowed eyes darting around the room as if searching for escape. Rachel opened with precision, laying out every piece of evidence we had gathered: the financial records, the messages, the harassment, the threats. She painted a picture so vivid, so undeniable, that even I felt the weight of it pressing against me. And then she revealed the photographs of my apartment, vandalized, violated, marked with cruelty. "This," Rachel said firmly, her voice cutting through the air like a blade, "is not just a dispute over property. This is a campaign of harassment, intimidation, and abuse designed to strip my client not only of her home, but of her dignity, her peace, and her safety." The judge's eyes hardened as he studied the photographs. Scott shifted uncomfortably. His mother's face remained frozen, but her knuckles whitened against the table. When it was their turn, Scott's mother unleashed every accusation she had left. She claimed I was manipulative, that I had seduced her son, only for money, that I had fabricated evidence, even that I had vandalized my own apartment to play the victim. Her words spilled out like poison, but they no longer had the bite they once did. The courtroom wasn't buying her venom. Not anymore. And then, in a moment that stunned everyone, Scott broke. He stood abruptly, his voice cracking as he shouted, "Enough, Mom, just stop!" The room went silent. He turned to the judge, his hands shaking. "She's telling the truth. Claire's telling the truth. Mom. She pushed me. She manipulated me. She made me believe everything was Claire's fault. But it wasn't. I was weak, and I let her control me, and I betrayed the only woman who ever truly cared about me. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. His mother's face contorted in horror, her hand reaching for him as though to silence him, but he pulled away. "I can't keep lying," he said, tears streaming down his face. "Claire deserves better than this. She always did." For a moment, time stopped. The judge's pen hovered above the paper, the audience held its breath, and I stood frozen, my heart pounding. I had dreamed of vindication, but I never expected it to come from Scott himself. The judge called for order, his voice steady as he announced that he would deliver the final verdict in writing within the week. The gavel struck, and just like that, it was over, at least for now. I walked out of that courtroom into a sea of flashing cameras and murmured questions. But all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat, steady and strong. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything I had endured. The love that turned to betrayal. The family that tried to destroy me, the nights spent in fear and despair. And yet I was still here. Stronger, sharper, no longer afraid. But I knew this wasn't just my story. It was a story shared by countless others who had been silenced, manipulated, erased. And if there was one thing I had learned, it was this: silence only feeds cruelty. Speaking the truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to reclaim yourself. The verdict would come soon, and whatever it said, I was ready. The week between the final hearing and the verdict felt like an eternity. Every day stretched on with unbearable slowness, every hour heavy with questions that circled endlessly in my mind. Would the judge see the truth? Would the years I had poured into my marriage be recognized for what they were? Sacrifice, devotion, and love twisted into chains by the people I trusted most. Or would I be erased, once again, cast aside as though I had never mattered? On the morning the verdict was to be delivered, I stood before the mirror in my small apartment. My hands trembled as I fastened the simple necklace my father had given me when I turned 18. I remembered his words that day: "Strength isn't about how hard you can strike Claire. It's about how many times you can rise again after you've been struck down." I carried those words with me as I walked into the courthouse. The air was thick with tension. Reporters whispered in the back, pens and cameras ready. Scott sat slumped in his chair, his face pale, his eyes downcast. His mother, though, remained rigid, her jaw clenched tight, her gaze fixed forward like a soldier preparing for battle. When the judge finally entered the room, fell into silence. He shuffled the papers before him, adjusted his glasses, and began to read. His words were deliberate, measured, each one cutting through the air like a blade. He acknowledged the evidence of financial contributions I had made to the house, the harassment and intimidation I had endured, the proof of Scott's infidelity, and the campaign of cruelty orchestrated by his mother. He dismissed their claims of abandonment, calling them unfounded and malicious. And then, with finality, he declared that the house would be sold, with half of the proceeds going to me as rightful recognition of my contributions. In addition, Scott was ordered to pay damages for emotional distress and legal costs. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't about the money. It had never truly been about the money. It was about validation. It was about hearing in a court of law that what had been done to me was wrong, that I was not invisible, not forgotten, not nothing. I closed my eyes, letting the tears spill freely. Scott sat motionless, his hands trembling in his lap. His mother, however, erupted. She shot to her feet, shouting accusations, her voice sharp and shrill. Security moved quickly to escort her out, her words echoing even as the doors shut behind her. "This isn't over. You'll pay for this." But for me it was over, at least this part of it. After the gavel struck for the last time, I walked out of that courtroom, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Reporters swarmed around me, their questions loud and pressing, but I simply lifted my chin and kept walking. I didn't owe the world more words. I had already spoken the truth where it mattered most. That evening, I went to visit my father's grave. I sat beside the headstone, the cool air brushing against my skin, and I told him everything. About the love I had lost, the battles I had fought, the pain that had nearly destroyed me. And finally, about the strength I had found in the ashes. "Dad," I whispered. I rose again. "Just like you said I would." The weeks that followed were not simple. Healing never is. Some nights I still woke with the echo of his mother's words in my ears. or the memory of Scott's betrayal weighing on my chest. But slowly the shadows began to lift. I found myself laughing again at small things, a coworker's joke, the warmth of sunlight on my face, the taste of coffee on a quiet morning. I began to dream again, not of love or marriage, but of freedom, of building a life that belonged to me alone, one no one could take away. And then one afternoon I received an envelope in the mail. My heart stopped when I saw the familiar handwriting, sharp and deliberate. For a moment, fear surged back, but when I opened it, I found not threats but silence. The envelope was empty, a last petty attempt to haunt me. I burned it in the sink, watching the paper curl and blacken until nothing remained but ash. And with it, I let go of the last remnants of their hold on me. I realized then that revenge wasn't about destroying them as much as part of me had longed to. It was about refusing to let them destroy me. It was about surviving, healing, and reclaiming my story from the hands of those who tried to write me out of it. I still don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day I'll love again, maybe I won't. But I know this: I will never again let anyone diminish me, silence me, or strip me of the truth of who I am. Because I am more than what they tried to make me. I am not their victim. I am my own redemption. And to anyone watching this who has ever felt erased, betrayed, or broken, please know this: you are not alone. Your pain is real, your story matters, and you have the strength to rise again, no matter how many times you are struck down. If this story has touched you, if you have ever faced battles of your own, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in stories that reveal the hidden strength inside us all, please like, share, and subscribe so we can keep telling them together.